They're not opting out, they're being pushed out. Why Black women's ambition isn't the problem. The system is welcome to soft girl era, the sacred space where strong Black women unlearn survival, rediscover softness, and reclaim the joy, rest, and freedom they deserve. I'm your host, LeAnne Dolce, pronounced Dolce, like sweet softness whispered in French. And I'm your guide from burnout to boundaries, from doing to being, from strong to soft, and loving every second of it. Today, I want to share something with you that's going to challenge everything you've been told about why you're exhausted, why you're overlooked, why your qualifications never seem to be enough, and why your ambition hasn't translated into the opportunities, the income, or the leadership roles you deserve. These insights come from the brilliant work of Edna Marshall, a transformative voice for Black women's leadership, economic power, and systemic change. Edna isn't just advocating for Black women to have a seat at the table, she's building entirely new tables, ones where our ambition is matched with opportunity, where our labor is honored with fair compensation and real advancement, and where our rest is protected as a sacred right, not a luxury. Her work is reshaping how we think about career trajectories, leadership pipelines, and the systems that have been designed, whether intentionally or not, to keep us grinding without ever truly thriving. So let's get into it. Here's the narrative we've been fed over and over again. Black women are opting out. We're stepping back from leadership. We're choosing flexibility over ambition. We're quiet quitting our careers because we're burned out, because we can't handle the pressure, because we're prioritizing balance. That's what they tell us. That's the story they want us to believe. But Edna Marshall brought receipts, and the receipts tell a completely different story. Black women are not opting out. We are being systematically pushed out, overlooked, underpaid, undersupported, and underestimated, even as our ambition, our education levels, and our workforce participation remain extraordinarily high. Let me say that again because this is the reframe that changes everything. The problem is not that Black women lack ambition. The problem is not that we're stepping back or giving up. The problem is that the systems, the structures, the leadership cultures, and the institutional commitments we're operating within are failing catastrophically to match our ambition with opportunity, support, and fair access. Let's look at the data. Companies are quietly rolling back commitments to women's advancement and especially to women of color. Only 54% of companies now say women's career advancement is a high priority. And that number drops even further to 46% for women of color. That's not us stepping back. That's them pulling the ladder up while we're still climbing. And here's what makes it even more painful, even more infuriating. Black women, like women, have some of the highest labor force participation rates among women in this country. We show up, we stay engaged, we stay ambitious, we stay educated, we stay committed. And yet we face higher unemployment and chronic underemployment than almost any other demographic group. Between 2024 and 2025, Black women's employment to population ratio dropped from 59.4% to 57.8%. That's a significant decline. Our unemployment rose from 5.3% to 6.3% in that same period. And other analyses show Black women's unemployment reaching 7.5%, far above white women's unemployment and far above the national average. So when you're sitting there late at night scrolling through job boards, wondering why you can't catch a break, why the promotion didn't come through, why you're overqualified and underemployed, why your resume gets passed over, even though you have the degrees, the experience, the track record. I need you to hear this. It is not you. It is the system. And let's talk about burnout because burnout is not just a buzzword. It's not just feeling tired after a long week. Burnout is what happens when your environment is fundamentally unsustainable. 60% of senior women report frequent burnout, but for senior Black women, that number jumps to 77%. 77%. That is not a personal failing. That is an environmental crisis. That is what happens when you are the only one in the room, when you are carrying the emotional labor of diversity and inclusion on top of your actual job responsibilities, when you are expected to be twice as good for half the recognition, half the pay, half the advancement opportunities, and when the systems that promised to support you, that made public commitments after 2020, quietly start to dismantle the very programs that were supposed to level the playing field. Edna Marshall calls this what it is: a quiet rollback. After the protests, after the public statements, after the diversity pledges, many organizations doubled down. They said the right things. They launched the programs. They hired the consultants. They created the employee resource groups. And then, as political and legal pressures mounted, as the cultural conversation shifted, as the news cycle moved on, they quietly backtracked. They defunded diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. They rebranded them. They slowed board refreshment efforts. They stalled leadership development pipelines. And Black women who had been disproportionately carrying the weight of that work, who had been advocating, educating, organizing, and holding space for those conversations, began to burn out and exit. So here's the reframe, and this is everything. The problem is not Black women's ambition. The problem is the systems, structures, and leadership cultures that are failing to match that ambition with opportunity, support, and fair access. And that reframe is everything. Because once you stop blaming yourself, once you stop internalizing systemic barriers as personal failure, you can start to strategize. You can start to name the system. You can start to build power outside of it. Let me share something with you. Over the past decade, some companies invested in structured leadership pipelines that deliberately identified and developed women, including Black women, into profit and loss roles. These are the roles that control budgets, that drive revenue, that manage teams, that are the critical stepping stones to the C suite. And guess what? Organizations that built those intentional pipelines, that made deliberate investments in women's leadership development, are the ones now supplying many of the Fortune 500's women CEOs. Deliberate investment works, intentional design works. But when companies pull back on equity efforts, when they cut funding, when they deprioritize women's advancement, women, especially Black women, are the first to be hit by layoffs, stalled careers, and burnout. So if you're in corporate, here's what you need to do: seek out profit and loss roles, demand transparency in hiring, promotion, and pay practices, align with sponsors, not just mentors. Sponsors are the people who advocate for you when you're not in the room, who put your name forward for high visibility projects, who fight for your advancement and push for accountability. Ask your organization to track promotion, pay, and attrition data by race and gender. Make the inequities visible, because what gets measured gets managed. But here's the second insight, and this is where it gets even more powerful. Economic power for Black women is both a personal priority and a community imperative. When Black women are pushed out of leadership and work, everyone loses. Families lose, businesses lose, the broader economy loses. For founders, for leaders, for policymakers, investing in Black women's careers, ventures, and leadership is not charity. It is a strategic growth move that strengthens innovation, resilience, and profitability across entire business ecosystems. Let me tell you about something that happened in Boston. Representative Ayanna Pressley convened a roundtable where policymakers, academics, business owners, and organizers came together to address Black women's unemployment. And they didn't just talk about it. They identified concrete strategies using state budgets and public policy to bolster business development for Black women, expanding microloans and small business financing, increasing government contracting access for Black women owned businesses, strengthening enforcement of anti discrimination laws, in recruitment, promotion, and layoffs. This roundtable elevated Black women's unemployment as a leading economic indicator, not a niche issue. It reframed it as a warning sign for the broader economy. And that's the power of collective advocacy. When Black women leaders, policymakers, and business owners push together, they can move resources, they can redesign programs, they can create structural solutions that support Black women owned ventures and professional advancement. So if you are struggling to get hired, properly paid, or fully utilized in your current role, it is not a reflection of your capability. It is a reflection of structural underinvestment. And that brings me to the third insight. You must build parallel power inside the system and outside of it. Given the rollback in diversity commitments and stalled progress in executive roles, relying solely on corporate pathways is dangerously risky. Black professionals and entrepreneurs need dual strategies. Inside organizations, seek profit and loss roles, demand transparency, align with sponsors, and push for accountability in hiring and promotion. Outside organizations, cultivate entrepreneurship, multiple income streams, strategic networks, and community based economic collaborations that are not hostage to corporate politics or election cycles. Let me give you another data point. During the first 8 months of 2025, more than 455,000 women left the U.S. workforce, while around 100,000 men entered jobs during the same period. Gender economist Katakaya Roy estimates 600,000 Black women have been shut out of the workforce since February of that year. 600,000. Women's representation in new board appointments declined. The share of women rising to CEO roles slowed, marking the lowest rate since 2020. And some women CEOs are exiting at higher rates. So, what does this mean for you? It means the environment is shifting beneath your feet. And that makes it even more vital to build transferable power in your skills, credentials, and networks, create or join collective economic vehicles, co ops, partnerships, community funds, Black women led businesses, evaluate employers and partners not on their public statements, but on their data and sustained commitments around Black women's hiring, pay, advancement, and retention. Because here's the truth: some organizations responded to this moment by doubling down on inclusive practices rather than retreating. They maintained or expanded flexible work policies while also ensuring visibility and access to advancement for remote and hybrid employees, particularly women of color. They continued to fund leadership development and diversity infrastructure instead of cutting these programs in response to political pressure. They ensured that board and CEO succession planning explicitly included women and women of color with measurable targets and accountability. And those companies are better positioned to retain top women talent, including Black women, and to weather reputation and innovation risks tied to homogenous leadership. But where commitments were rolled back, women's workforce participation and leadership representation stagnated or declined. That illustrates the cost of treating diversity, equity, and inclusion as optional rather than foundational to business strategy. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Your ambition is not the problem, the system is. Stop internalizing systemic barriers as personal failure. Name the system, strategize around it, build or join spaces that honor your value. Economic power for Black women is both a personal priority and a community imperative. Investing in Black women's careers, ventures, and leadership is a strategic growth move that benefits everyone. And you must build parallel power inside the system and outside of it. Seek profit and loss roles, demand transparency, align with sponsors, and cultivate entrepreneurship, multiple income streams, and community based economic collaborations. Now, here's my challenge to you: Over the next 30 days, choose one concrete way to build your own economic and leadership power, independent of any single employer. If you're in corporate, identify one profit and loss, revenue driving, or strategic project you can step into or propose, and approach a potential sponsor about backing you on it. If you're an entrepreneur, run a focused 30-day experiment to grow a specific revenue stream, a new offer, a price test, a partnership, a contract opportunity. Track what works. And for everyone, join or create a Black women centered economic circle, a mastermind, an investment club, a business coalition, an accountability group where you regularly share information about opportunities, contracts, jobs, and capital. Then ask yourself this question: if I stopped assuming the system will eventually make room for me, what power would I start building for myself and my community right now? That is the question I want you to sit with. That is the reflection I want you to carry into every career decision, every business move, every boundary you set, every time you choose yourself. Because here's the thing, sis, you are not broken. You are not lacking. You are not too much or not enough. You are operating in systems that were never designed to support your full flourishing. And once you see that, once you really see it, you can stop trying to fix yourself and start building the power, the networks, the businesses, and the life that you deserve. This is your soft girl era. This is your time to release the cape, to redefine strength, to embrace softness, to heal in real time, to protect your peace as a practice, and to turn survival into something sacred. So stop waiting for permission. Stop waiting for the system to change. Start building your power today. Start building it with intention, with strategy, with community, and with an unshakable belief that you deserve every bit of the freedom, the joy, the rest, and the abundance you've been working toward your entire life. The system may not be ready for you, but you don't need the system's permission to build your own.